Folks, we continue in this 25th letter, understanding the Koyach HaPoel B'Nifal, the power of creator within creation. And this is in many different manners, many different gradations. What we learned previously is that Malchus, royalty, this last of the 10 divine attributes, is the conduit of the power to create from God, and it creates everything in all worlds, in spiritual worlds and in this physical world, everything that is holy, that is connected to its source. And then, from there, Malchus of Asiya vests itself or finds itself in the patron angels of the 70 nations of the world. And those angels, which means divine energies, forces of God, that are separate from their source, they recognize God, but they recognize him as a God of gods, that they have power themselves. And they funnel existence, vitality into all of creation outside of the land of Israel and give it its vitality in a manner that the source that it comes from, God, Ein Sof, Hashem, Shmoi, him, his name, is in exile. Meaning, just like a king who can be imprisoned is not the prince of the king metaphor is in prison. He's still the prince of the king, but he can't act as the prince of the king. He can act on some level, of course. He can still act princely in prison, but he can't act in the full manner of the prince of the king because he's in prison. So likewise, the force of God, the Kedusha, the holiness, that force of God is imprisoned, isn't exercising its power, that what it creates is completely connected to its source. Again, the source for this creation, patron angels, they themselves recognize God, but again, God of gods, because they themselves, being a separate entity, feel their power, and then feel that they have power what to give to everything outside of the Holy Land that is imbued with that power. So whether it's animals, whether it's trees, whether it's the land itself, and so on. Now, that force of God is, as we said, is in exile in this manner, but it also expresses itself in another place where it's not in exile, unless we pick it up and bring it into exile. We're talking about the godly soul. In other words, the way God creates, animates everything of this world is in a manner that the spark of God, the power of God, is hidden. But there's a place where, in its natural state, it's not hidden, aside from the Holy Land. And that is in the divine soul. Because the divine soul has 10 powers of the soul, which is a reflection of the 10 divine attributes of God. So we have Chochmah, Bina, V'das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, abbreviated as Chabad. Right? In our soul, which corresponds to the divine wisdom of God. How do we get it? is because everything else in creation, God spoke into creation. Malchus is speech. All right, so God spoke and said, let there be light. Let the rakia, the firmament, separate between the waters above and the waters below, and so on and so forth. Spoke it into being. However, this soul, he didn't speak into being. This soul is metaphorically, as we learned in Genesis, that God blew to the nostril the breath of life, a living being in Adam, which that metaphor is just as, blowing takes a deeper energy than talking. But blowing, if your kid has a birthday party and you want to blow balloons, at a certain point you can't blow anymore. Why? Because it's coming from a deeper part. So that is a metaphor to understand that the 10 powers of our soul come from a deeper part in the divine order from God, from a deeper part within him, a place where it's not an exile, just in its sort of in the divine soul. And that's what it means he blew. In a more spirit and vitality into our soul. And this is separated into 10 powers of the soul. So the Chochmah and Bina that we have, the wisdom, understanding, reflects, is sourced ultimately in what we call Abba Ve'ima. The Zohar calls father and mother to wisdom and understanding, Chochmah and Bina, and it's rooted above, and Das is a combination of the two that funnels into our emotions. And likewise, our emotive attributes, which is the basic emotions are love and fear, love of God and fear of God, meaning the sense of presence of God, or the magnitude of awesomeness of God. Right? This is connected to the 6 divine emotions of God. What does it mean it's connected? It means it reflects it. It's not coming through a conduit of an angel that's klipa, that produces a covering over on that in our soul. And then finally, we have speech, which is connected to the supernal speech of God, which is Malchus. As we've learned, Malchus means royalty. King rules with his word. God creates with his word. That creation of God that he creates with his word, which means words matter, is now corresponds within us, that he blew within us, that part of him, that we have the capability of language. We have unique capability of language that, of course, animal kingdom doesn't have. We can speak about ideas. Animals can communicate, but can only communicate. They can't communicate ideas. They can communicate, sense of danger, sense of finding food, only things that are related to survival. But the human being has that capability of communication, communicating not just the need for survival. I'm hungry, let me eat. That's a child. Cries before they can speak that they're hungry. But as we are discussing here, ideas. So this comes from the supernal speech of God, sphere of Malchus, and the power of speech that we have in our soul. And as the Alter Rebbe concludes this idea that therefore, when we are to fulfill a mitzvah of prayer or like thanking God from the food that we ate, Birchas Hamazon, grace after meals, one has to verbalize it. It's not enough to think it, because that way we are expressing the power of our soul that reflects the power of God's sovereignty, his royalty. Likewise, when we have love and fear of God in our divine soul, that's reflecting the emotive, the qualities of Zeir Anpin, minor visage, the emotive divine attributes of God Almighty. It's reflecting, because that's where it's sourced in. Again, from the metaphor of God blew the breath of life into the nostril of Adam, this divine soul. So what this means is that anytime we engage and occupy ourselves with something of divine nature, so whether it's prayer, Torah studying as we're doing now, whether whatever acts of loving kindness, of charity, and the like, we are capable of accessing the divine soul that we have in us, that have these powers of our soul, reflecting the divine attributes of God, and therefore we are revealing outwardly, reflecting the divinity within us, as opposed to the patron angels that give vitality to a tree, to an animal. And what we'll learn, that it's a very short class today that I kind of made long. What we will learn, that's one aspect that we have, one capability, but God makes within us the opposite capability, that we could hence choose this or that. What's that? The opposite of what we just learned here, which we'll learn tomorrow. Which we will learn tomorrow. But the point is that when I use my mouth to study Torah, to pray, to do some kind of mitzvah, when I use my arm to extend it in helping somebody, the vitality I'm getting then is direct from God's divine attributes, which his divine attributes are one with him. So what does that mean? In that moment, I'm one with God. I'm one with him. What we want to come to is understanding the opposite, because that's what our challenge is. To do good and to be one with God, we get that. But the opposite, how is it? Excuse me. How is it that the opposite is true, that when we do something evil, how is that power coming from God? That's the basis of what we're learning over here. We want to understand, how is it that evildoers are not what we would instinctively, and all other faiths and religion see duality in the world and see duality in the heavens above. So therefore, there is the Godhead, and there's the anti-Godhead, Satan and the like. And there's power battle between them. That's idolatry. That's the idea of the patron angels, feeling that they have a power of their own. Okay, maybe they're not the Satan, but they are something. They're not. They're only messengers of God. But what we've explained till now is the way we connect to God, because when we do a mitzvah that's based on the godly soul, so we have a godly soul that in its powers that connect us to the divine attributes of God, that those divine attributes are one with him. God and his name referring to the divine attributes, are one with him. Even in this world, not just in the heavens above. So the question, though, is that if you don't extend your hand to do good, but you extend your hand, God forbid, to harm somebody, or you use your mouth not to say a blessing, but to say something nasty, negative, hurtful. The vitality is not coming from a negative, an anti, God. It's coming from God. How? We need to understand. How do we understand that? So far we've understood some ideas, but we're going to continue. We are going to continue. So Linda asked a very good question. Why does God let the patron angels feel that way? In other words, that they recognize God, but he's a God of gods. They themselves are a deity, meaning that they're separate and have power. That's what it means, deity, right? That you have some kind of power, rather than you have no power at all. All you are is a messenger of the divine, completely nullified to your source. So why does God do that? Well, otherwise you wouldn't have Klippa. Otherwise, if God only made everything completely holy, then we wouldn't have our job. What to do is to unearth, unveil godliness in the world. That's our job. By the way, folks, I'm restarting my weekly Sunday night class on Chabad Facebook, Chabad Zichrain, ZK, or on Zoom. If you're interested and you're not on the email list, so send me your email, private messaging, tonight at 6:30, God willing. So please join us. Angels have no free will, Andrew says, as we do. Are we spiritually higher doing mitzvah? Absolutely. Exactly. We are higher because of that, because angels, in the end, are separate created entities, but as we just explained, we have a divine soul that allows, that is totally connected and one with God. And through doing a mitzvah, it allows us to freely choose to reveal that divine connection in every aspect of our being. Yep. All right. Thank you for your questions. And thank you for being a part of this. Much appreciated, because through you, I learn and know better for myself and able to make a greater impact. Because ultimately, all of us, that's what we're here for. We have to make an impact in this world. God forbid the person who writes the suicide note. What does the person say? Whether I'm here or not here doesn't make a difference, and it's too painful to be here. Sayonara. Goodbye. So the bottom line is we need to make a difference. So difference could be, doesn't have to be a world-changing difference. Difference can be to one person. It could be to several people, to a family, outside, whatever it is. But we all have a purpose into making a difference. So I thank you for allowing me to make a difference in your lives and in my life as a result. Much appreciated. And you can further make a difference by sharing, of course, the class. Simple way of doing that. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadesh in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and pleasure to share with you, Tanya. Have a wonderful day, a good Tvach, good week, and a Chodesh Tov, a good month.